Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. The beleaguered South African platinum industry convened last week under professional facilitators to launch the framework for the co-crafting of a new dispensation for the strife-torn sector. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer tells us more. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Shannon.
Now, last week, 5 core themes emerged at the meeting at the Chamber of Mines. Can you tell us more about these themes?
Yeah, it's part of the DNA in South Africa that when there's trouble, we get together. And typically they did it in quite grand style at the Chamber of Mines, in the Chamber of Mines premises, which they even had to discuss because, the Chamber of Mines is really an interested party. So it shouldn't do it in its own building, for instance. But they were saying, look, it's free. We've got a lot of rooms for you. Let's just use this facility. And everyone pitched up. That was anyone. All the platinum companies pitched up. The main unions pitched up, including the adversarial unions, and also the government pitched up with the minister kicking it off. And I think she made quite an important point in that she said, look, the door needs to be kept open for those who are not here. And that was a very significant statement because we know that the union movement is crumbling. And strike committees, whose leader you can't find these days, often holds the key to this decision making. So I think that door needs to be left open, or alternatively the unions need to regain all their ground. But this lost ground there could be a problem. And the 5 themes, of course, the first one covers it all. We want a long-lasting and prosperous, sustainable platinum industry. Brother, if we don't do that, we must be the silliest South Africans in the world. Here we've got this endowment that no one else in the world has got. We've got an Aladdin's cave of treasure in our great big bushveld complex. Any other country would be so pleased to have this. I mean, can you imagine a place like Korea that had to lift itself up on its bootstraps from agriculture? It's a much more difficult thing. We've got agriculture, we've got our opportunity to do with our metals and minerals, and we're shooting ourselves in both feet and hopefully not the head and heart, because sometimes one wonders what the motives are of some of these people. And then after the first theme, which is the big theme, it goes on to the problem themes, and the replacement of current decentralized company level bargaining arrangements with centralized bargaining. Now that's glib, easily said, but if you talk to the top labor lawyers at the moment, they're saying, look, don't over centralize. You've got to have 2 tiers. But it must be organized, and we must rewrite the Labour Relations Act because it really doesn't reflect global best practice. There are countries around the world that know what they're doing. They've gone through this, since the 30s. They've got it down to a fine art. Let's copy them. And let's be more democratic when it comes to this, because the thinking that I'm getting from the top Labour lawyers is that at centralized level, at most, all you must set are minimum wage levels, minimum, and some of them are even saying, look, you don't even have to have that. If you had economists just coming together, working out what the minimum wage level could be, that could be your starting point, because they're trying to emphasize again this enterprise level of bargaining, which they say is so necessary. Maybe not so much totally in the mining environment, although I think it is important, because every mine is different. And if you get a manager hamstrung, he's just got to pay the same salaries, even if he's got a bright team here, and he can't reward them the way that you should do it. And so what the top Labour lawyers are saying, look, have that central bargaining position, but treat it as a minimum wage. Then go into your enterprise and say to the guys, look, we're lagging here in world productivity. We're way behind. This is what you can get if you really perform here. Let's set some targets. And in the past, I think we've been going to the lowest common denominator. It hasn't been doing the country any good. And then they'll go on to wages and the other themes and restoring stability. That's a huge thing. And the final theme, the socio-economic deficits. Now, how have these socio-economic evils built up? I think they're going to have to look at the migrant labour system. Because we've come out of apartheid in that hostile era. During that hostile era, there seemed to be a greater attachment of the workers to the rural areas where they lived. So there'd be a lot of money sent home, a lot of remittances and all sorts of things they purchased here. That is now seems to be split because they've got these living out allowances and they're living in near mine communities, putting up a zinc shack close to the platinum mine generally. And, their money is being dissipated. And one wonders whether, you've either got to have, you've got to have world best practice in migrant labour systems. Number one, we haven't got them. You can't leave people on these long cycles. They only go home at Christmas and Easter. I mean, that is pathetic. You've got to get them through it. And the benefit for the company is that if they've got shorter cycles, they can also have continuous mining, which they've been looking for, round-the-clock mining. So link it to round-the-clock mining, but let these people go home more often if you're going to keep the migrant labour system. Otherwise, you're perpetuating an evil. And then fly them home or do something to get them home. Now, then you might say, oh, that's costing a lot. Well, then incentivize them to bring their rural families to the mine. One or the other. You cannot have both. And, the mines, if they don't do something about this fast, they're going to be found guilty of perpetuating some social evils that are going to be a scourge for us.
Because those people are now effectively funding two families, themselves near the mine, as well as their families back home.
Exactly. And that's why they need so much money. That Bafokeng study which said one miner touches the lives of 26 people. I mean, that's horrific. And then on top of it, we've got all this violence. And the conditions in which they live. I mean, I'm told by these top people that some of the shop stewards who are supposed to be the union members who represent the workers, they're not only shop stewards, they're also councillors. Now, if that is a case, that they've got time to go and do this extramural work for extra pay, I'm sure, and some of them driving 3 cars apparently and, living it up, neglecting their real job, I think some serious action should be taken against people who have not only not serviced the mine workers, but they haven't even enforced the council bylaws. Where's the water? Where's the sewage? Where's the refuse collection? Where are the roads? And people say you go there and you find these kids playing on the dumps. No one at school. I mean, gee whiz. And the living out allowance has fueled us. The mines have got to deal with that. Otherwise, they're going to be found seriously guilty of a dereliction of social duty. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, and they better move fast.
Now, what do these discussions mean for the platinum sector and for mining in general?
I think we're going to have mines, the industry is going to be rebuilt. Already people are talking, let's start discussing the technology for the mine of the future. Now, the mine of the future is going to have far fewer people. I mean, look what they're doing in Australia. You get a few guys sitting in Perth controlling iron ore mines hundreds of kilometres away, pushing buttons. There are driverless trucks, there are driverless trains, port activities being automated. So, the mining industry in the open cast fashion lends itself to a lot more mechanisation and automation than we've done here. But I think as South Africans, we must leap right over the mechanisation as fast as we can, go straight into the automation, see mines not as labour intensive, but as capital intensive. And then that will generate the wealth for the country. And you will get far more highly educated people having to deal with that situation. There'll be a need for a lot more training. I mean, they must rethink it. We know that the black-owned Exoro now is going to launch its mine of the future next month. We see that Anglo Gold Ashanti has said, look, we want to leap right over mechanisation into automation at this very deep level stuff because no human being should go down there. We've got Rio Tinto, even they've registered their trademark. They say the mine of the future is their trademark. So they're working like crazy to get this going. We know Anglo's got the mine 2030. And we know that the Bafokeng community, which now own Fraser Alexander, it's a 100-year-old company, they have asked that a special project be the community of the future, the mine community of the future, and so that these communities can become self-sustaining. And we've seen the Bafokeng themselves have spent a lot of money on infrastructure. They've saved the tax man from that. I mean, they've taken their dividends that they've got from platinum and they've actually done the job of the local authority. What has the local authority been doing? I mean, we need a truth commission here. Bring them before. Is this a serious dereliction of duty? I mean, are there criminal implications here? I mean, this is serious. They're holding this country to ransom. They're smashing up one of our most important industries.
And they're still paying tax, so where's that money going?
And we're giving them that money, you know. So, yeah, we're all in this. We've all got to get out of it, and we've got to get out of it fast. It's probably not the best thing to point fingers, but there's certain omissions here which are glaring.
Now, a gold framework was also agreed upon. Can you tell us about that?
Well, the gold boys didn't allow us too close to them, I'm afraid. The journalists got the short shrift there, whereas platinum, they opened the door. Firstly, on the first day, you know, they have made it confidential since then, but we've just had to rely on releases from the gold industry, which I think is regrettable. It would be nice to have sat around the table at least a few times and got some statement, you know, firsthand, but they chose to keep mining publications, particularly, it seems, at arm's length, not invite them in. So we're sitting at a distance, but it seems the main thing is that they're prepared to lift entry-level pay. So they're prepared to lift entry-level pay, the lower scales, regrade, but not budge on their long-term agreements, the 2-year agreements, the ones that some of them expire in mid-year 2013.
So we can expect more strikes then?
Well, I hope not, because I don't think any union worth its salt now deserves to go on strike. The unions have been seen to be wanting. They owe us. They owe us, you know, big time in this country. They've had tremendous scope, too much law, which they've now not used properly, and now we've got to reinvent that Labour Relations Act, base it on world best practice, and say this is how it's going to work from now on. You are going to work for your living. You're going to compete for that space. You're not just going to have a monopoly. Where do we have a monopoly in the world? Do we have a monopoly? Do you have a monopoly? Nobody's got a monopoly. These unions have had a monopoly. But we'll give them a monopoly if they can go in and persuade in specific situations that the workers want them, and there must be special verification exercises and measurement of support to say, this union has won 50 plus 1, so we are going to give them sole rights to bargaining over a specific period, and then the deadline must come, and they must be kept on their toes, because not having proper competition has led to this huge malaise.
But now also it encourages people to be paid when they're not performing.
That is what is worrying, that if you just over-centralize and everyone gets the same, you know, you might as well goof off.
Why not?
Yeah. So I think, you know, these lawyers from Bowman Gilfillan, who this week, they were so firm that we must have 2-tier. In fact, one of them said he would love to just collapse the centralised side, but he said he's being a bit radical because, you know, you could have top-class economists come in and say, this should be the minimum wage. No one in South Africa should earn less than that. And that could be the starting point. And then that would form the base of, and then have sectors that also reach minimum wage for those sectors, because so you'll have this overall minimum wage plus sectoral minimum wages, and then you engage in the second tier, where companies are obliged then to interface with their staff at workplace level, at the workplace, which is just being excluded here. I mean, how are we going to have productivity in this country, you know, if the lowest common denominator is the benchmark? You know, you're not going to get the productivity, and we're seriously lacking in that.
Well, thank you very much, Martin.
It's a great pleasure, Shannon. It's a great pleasure.
That's the show for today. Join us again next time for more news and insight into what's happening in the mining world.